Hi there. Today we're going to do this little Christmas robin. It's fairly quick. You just want a bit of salt for the background and some lovely colours to build into it. And that's it. Let's just get going. Okay, we're going to look at this little winter robin now. A very simple shape. And again, this is a quick thing which you can do and either do it on your own or do it with children or something like that, because you can draw the shape out for the children and then they can paint it. You don't have to go mad and do a background with it, and you could actually paint it out quite small and just do it, fold the card in half and just do it as a Christmas card if you wanted to. But this one, we'll just do it as a normal picture to start with. So, to draw a robin. Robin shapes they have, when you're doing birds, you start off with the egg shape. So with birds, you always start off with the egg. You then have another egg for its head. Oop, just made that a very strange egg shape. Let me just find my little rubber and just take out the front wobbly bit on there. I think I might be able to just do it with this one. Yes, that's just enough. And then just a straight line down the back. That becomes his wing. So just bring it down to about the same level as his body here. So this becomes his wing. So bring up a little bit of the tail, the wing feather, bring it round. And that will just go into the patterning on top of the head there. So just bring it round for that one. Put another little bit of a tail underneath, in line with that one. Square it off at the end. A little beak. And this is just like a little kite shape at the end there, and then an eye somewhere in the middle of that other egg. And all you need to do is put his little legs on now. The legs, strangely enough, they come out of the body and then come forwards, and then the little claws will come round to hang onto a branch or onto the ground or whatever. So a couple of little claws, and that's your robin. So really quite a simple shape for a robin. Start off with an egg, another egg on top, straight line down the back, and that becomes your robin shape. Let's put him on a little branch, so we've got something for him to stand on or hang on to with his little claws. One claw will disappear around the back and two come forwards. So we just bring that off round. And he's on a little branch. To liven that up, you can either put a bit of holly on. In fact, I think I'll put berries on that one originally, but let's put a little bit of a holly leaf onto it. So a bit more seasonal. And we'll have another little holly leaf coming off here. And perhaps a berry or two. And that probably, perhaps should we have another holly leaf down this end just to make him balance out a bit? So have a little bit of a stem, then another holly leaf. Okay, so there's a little robin, nice and ready for action now. So the first thing we need to do with this is do a bit of a background onto him. So we're just going to make a bit of a colour for the background. It's up to you what sort of colours we want to work with this. We're just going to mix up a strong bluey green colour. I personally like something like a phthalo blue or Prussian blue and a burnt sienna, which will give me a really strong dark green. It works quite well this as a colour mix, or you can just use an ordinary blue, ultramarine blue and a touch of yellow, because that will just again give you a strong dark green. But this is just a little bit more lively, a bit more interesting as a colour scheme. You could just have a blue background if you wanted to. It doesn't have to have any other colours into it at all, but it just gives it a bit more depth onto this picture. So that should be about enough there. Always mix more paint than you think you're going to need, because it often takes quite a bit of paint and you don't realise you don't want to start mixing paint up while the water's on there. I'm now going to use a big mop brush and I'm going to wet all around the back of him. I'm going to avoid the robin himself, so just go straight up the back. Don't worry about the beak, you can just go over the beak there, round his body, over his legs. I might just flick it over the rest of the leaves a little way, but I might not paint into them but I'll just put a little bit so it blends around the edges on those, and then off away around the rest of the picture. What I also want to do is give this the effect of snowflakes in the background, a bit of frost in the background. So I'm going to put a pinch of salt into that as well. So just bringing that round. Up and away. So it's staying glossy wet. So I'm moving around here, just making sure there's no dry patches apart from the robin himself. And then the rest of it will be staying glossy wet. But you have your board tilted so it doesn't sit in a puddle in the middle. Even though you wet it that far, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to paint that far. But I'm going to swap now to a big round brush, and I'm just going to carefully put in a little bit of the colour. So I'm going to start at the top, work my way down, just to give this halo of the background. Just bring it up to the robin, keep your brush loaded with paint, around the robin's chest there, away into the background. Away into the background. Just, I'm not going to go too mad over those leaves, just let that run a little bit. Doesn't matter if it's a bit soft around the edges there. Again, bringing this down, you can see it's staying nice and puddly wet, which will make it go soft around the edges there, but sharp where I've left it to go onto dry paper. You have to wet the paper for doing these backgrounds, because otherwise it will go very stripy, and you want to keep it soft and fuzzy for this part. So again, I'll just avoid a little bit of those leaves, but again, I've wet them over, but not the robin. You can see the robin's nice and sharp on those edges there, because we're going to work back into him in a moment. So once we've got that background on, I'll just put a little bit more paint away. I'll just let it blur towards the outside edges here. We're just going to pause for a minute. Just keep an eye on it. Just make sure that it's not going to go too puddly. And if you want to take any puddles out, just dry your brush. If you've wobbled a bit or you want to lift out anything, if you just dry your brush, and a bit of clean kitchen roll, dry your brush, just drag your brush through. I'll just put that branch back in. So it gives me a little bit of light and dark with it. If I've wobbled a bit around the edge, I just rub my little clean brush down those edges to make it lift out again. It's a nifty way of keeping things a little bit lighter. And then we're going to put a little pinch of salt. This is just household salt. I use fine grain sea salt, or if you wanted to, another nice way of working, as I shall do that, not with that, but actually use a salt grinder. So I get different sizes in with that then. And then just as it starts to go off, before it dries completely, you just want to sprinkle on about 20 grains of salt, or perhaps 25. We'll just have one or two more, and then we're going to leave it to dry and see what happens. Okay, so that's now nice and dry, and as you can see, the salt's just absorbed the paint, giving it the effect of little snowflakes in the background. It's always different. It's different whatever salt you use. It's different with different colours, and depends how wet it is. So it's always a surprise when it's completely dry to see what you've got. If you are going to do this, don't go mad with the salt. If you go put handfuls of it on, you'll end up with no paint on the paper. So it's a good start to just use 20, 30 grains at the most. Right, now this is completely dry, rub the salt off, and we can get painting into the robin. We're just going to use the, start with the palest colours first. So this is going to be the underside of him, which is a sort of bluey grey colour. Ultramarine blue, touch of burnt umber gives me a bluey grey colour. I'm also going to get the other colours ready and waiting there. Perhaps some brown, a bit of burnt umber, a little puddle of that on its own somewhere, just to get that on the go. And then some stronger ultramarine blue and burnt umber as well, for the little markings into his wings and things. So just put that ready, a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber. Then of course the all-important reddish colours. So we want a nice orangey red, quite strong with that, and then a little bit more of a deeper crimsony red, and all I'm going to do is just make that little puddles on my palette there. So right now, ready for action. So what we're going to do with this is get a small brush, bit of clean water, and we're just going to dash some bits of water in the direction of the feathers. So just dashing on a few bits of water in the direction of the feathers up the chest there, and you might do, let's just do that little bit first, and then we'll just do the weak ultramarine blue and burnt umber mix. Just drop it in, just let it run up the lower part of his, well, his tummy really, isn't it, around that area. Just bring it up. You could put a little bit of yellow ochre into that as well, just to give him a little bit of change of colour. The paint will follow where you put in those dashes of water. So if you want to give them the direction of the feathers, I keep saying fur today, feathers, you put your water in that direction and you'll find the paint follows it. So we can go down his tail with some longer dashes of water into my browns now, my little puddle of brown I've got here, burnt umber, and just putting some longer dashes, and that just gives you the right sort of colouring in there. We're just going to add a little bit more dark, burnt umber, ultramarine blue, just down the end of the tail, because it's just going to make it look a little bit stronger down the bottom there. We can go along the wing, same sort of way. This time he's got some longer flight feathers, so he's going to be longer ones down the wing here. So this is the water first, a little bit down the end of the wing there as well. Then as it goes around the head, it's shorter, little shorter dashes. So again, a bit of the burnt umber, reasonable strength, and you put these longer dashes down the wing here. Reasonable strength, and that was a big thick lump, and I don't want that in there. So it's quite nice to leave these little light bits showing through, because that gives you the effect of the feathers, hopefully. Building those up down the length of the wing, and as we get down the bottom here, we're going to pop in a little bit of ultramarine blue burnt umber, something a bit darker, to give me the shape of these, the tips of his wing here. So again, just leaving some of those light bits to show through, little bits of paper showing through there, and go back to the brown, because I put little dots of water up here. The brush strokes get shorter as it comes up around his head, and then we just dot it on around the top of his head here to give him his little cap on top of his head there. So he's looking quite nice already. We just need to put the red chest on him. So again, I'm just going to clean water, not grubby water as I've just used there. Clean water, little brush, just dot on some little bits of water around the chest, around the face. Just dot it on around here, because we just want little tiny bits of shaping into him. And then in with your orangey red, down the bottom here, in the direction of the feathers, keeping it going round. Whenever you're doing animals and birds, it tends to be from the eye or from the beak or from the nose outwards. So everything goes from there or upwards towards the beak or the eye. Just bringing those bits in, up towards the eye, around the eye. Just dot it on into that water. I haven't flattened it with the water, I've just put dashes and dots of water on there, so it blurs in some places but not in others. And then I've got a bit of a darker red as well in a moment, so just bring that round the edge of his face, just dot it in, leave those little light bits to show through with the watercolours there. And then a little bit of stronger red, you might want to just put that under his chin a little way to give him a bit of shaping if they have chins. I'm not sure whether robins have chins, but just around the edges, just to make it a little bit more shapely, a little bit to the underside of the belly there. We'll leave those to dry a little bit, so that I can then put the other bits on in a few moments. So while that's drying, we can perhaps put a couple of holly leaves on. So again, we want a nice strong either ultramarine blue and a touch of cadmium yellow, or a strong Prussian blue, phthalo blue, intense blue with a tiny bit of burnt sienna into it. That makes it go a nice strong bottle green colour, make it a bit more greeny than your background. I'm going to use that one, or perhaps even both. And again, just clean my brush now, and then I'm going to put onto the leaves while he's just drying out a little bit. I'm going to put a little bit of water carefully onto the one side of the holly leaf, leaving the centre vein dry. I'll do a little bit on the other side, touching the ends, leaving that centre vein dry. It sometimes helps to use grubby water with this, because you can actually see where you're going. And then into the nice strong dark, and just pop that in to the ends. Let it run back into that water, so you don't have to do it everywhere. Just let it run so you get some light and dark into it. Make sure that goes nice and spiky on the ends. Perhaps put in a bit of yellowy green as well, ultramarine blue, and a touch of cadmium yellow to give you some varying colours in that. Make that centre vein a little bit thinner, a little bit shorter, and there's a holly leaf. I'll do a couple more. Just wet the one side with a slightly grubby water, a small brush, leave the centre vein dry. And then in with your start with your more yellowy colours first, really. Yellowy greens to start with, just generally in some places, and then we'll touch in with a darker, stronger, more bluey green into that. Not everywhere, just let those colours run together. Last little leaf, same sort of thing. Wet it first, leave the centre vein dry, make it sure it joins at the ends, in with a yellowy green to start with, in one area, or perhaps two, let that run in, and then in with your stronger greens, making it come a bit more spiky on the edges, because they're quite sharp and spiky, those little leaves. Those are all the leaves done. By the time you've done that, this should be dry enough to put his little beak in now, and his eye. So we'll just do a little bit of ultramarine blue and burnt umber, something nice and dark. You could probably use a little bit of Payne's grey or something for this as well. Well, it's up to you. So with his eye, we're just going to do a little circle, leaving a little tiny bit of light at the top. And then he's same with his beak, just a little diamond shape, trying to leave just a fraction of light at the top there. So he's nearly done. We've just got to put his legs on him. But before we do his legs, we need to put a little branch on there. So we're just going to wet this branch. Be careful of your holly leaves if they're still wet. Wet along that branch, and then into the bottom of that, a little bit of burnt umber, ultramarine blue. Make it a little bit more brown. Let it run up in some places, and then let it just fade away on the end, at the ends here. Just run that along, make it darker at the bottom, but let some of that little bit of light shine through as well. Just bringing that up along the bottom here. Across the end. Oh, did I wet that bit? It doesn't look very wet. Let me just wet that bit again. I want it to run, otherwise it will go very hard on the edges, and you just want it to run to give you the shape of this branch, and leaving some of the light shining through. That will do for the branch. We'll just pop a couple of these holly berries in. So again, onto dry paper this time. We just do a little circle, leave a little bit of light towards the top end of it. Holly berry. Circle, a little bit of light to the top edge, a little bit of light to the top edge. So it just gives that shine to the little berry. Pause for a minute to make sure it's all dry. Tiny little brush, and let me just use a little thin brush. Oh, there's a nice little thin brush. And I will just put his little legs on. This goes onto dry paper. Again, I'm just going to use that ultramarine blue and burnt umber mix. Let's bring a little bit of his leg down, and a claw or two over the front. Little leg, claw or two over the front, make that a little bit stronger. Hopefully, it's best to wait till that branch has dried before you do that. But there we go. A little Christmas robin for you, very quickly done on a snowy background.